let's reflect on the British Grand Prix, a sensational win for Lewis Hamilton. Did we see it coming?
That's an interesting question, Ben. I think just the end of the race, when you've got Hamilton leading, Norris comes out of the pits, he's second, Max Verstappen third. Fantastic, 3 best drivers, certainly at the end of that race. Certainly the top 2 of the season so far in Max and Lando. Lewis, you just never know, because he's been beaten by George so regularly, George Russell, out of the race because of a water system issue. He certainly, as soon as he had a sniff of victory, he was there. Did I see it coming? In the early stages, Mercedes looked like they were in control. McLaren, came to the fore. I think they'll reflect on this being a race that they lost.
Yes.
But I really thought, here we go, this is it. I've seen this movie, Max Verstappen coming back. There's just something about when Lewis Hamilton's in front of Silverstone, he wasn't going to be denied, was he?
I'm glad you mentioned the movie. They were filming the movie here, weren't they? We saw them on the grid before. F1 movie coming out next year, all very exciting. This was a Hollywood script, wasn't it? Lewis Hamilton winning home Grand Prix for Mercedes, 104th win, 945 days since his last victory. There does seem to be a lot of emotion. He was crying. I've never heard him cry. Coming back on the back to the pits, and Bono, his race engineer, was crying as well. It just shows how much this result means to him, doesn't it?
Massively. I think he claims that he's never cried at a win. And I think the sort of the almost hyperbolic quality to it, the over the top, the wow, everything, is because it had been so long. Like you asked him in the press conference, does this feel like this had sort of the final thing to get over what happened in 2021? He gave quite an interesting answer, which was sort of like, only time will tell, I'm going to keep pushing. And I don't know about you, but I think that means he'll only be over it when he gets that 8th world title and gets back what he lost.
I agree, and I can't help thinking that that's probably in the back of his mind, thinking about the move to Ferrari. That's obviously what's triggered that off. And interestingly, you mentioned that, and it was mentioned by one of our colleagues in the press conference. Lewis, are you a little bit upset to be leaving Mercedes, knowing now that you have a car that's capable of fighting for wins? And again, he gave quite a good answer, didn't he? He was saying, this was all about the emotion and finishing on a high with Mercedes. But of course, we don't know how it's going to be at Ferrari when he joins next year.
Yeah, a bit of a different answer to what he gave to basically the same question in the press conference yesterday. Then it was very much no, his mood, demeanour changed. Certainly not very happy after being asked about that yesterday, but he'd just been defeated by his teammate and he wouldn't have known what was going to happen today, of course. So totally understandable that the emotions, the high of victory would mean that things are going to get a different reaction. Also Tom Carey from the Telegraph, he's known Lewis a while. There'll be a certain element of got to give a good answer here, because I don't know what's going to go in that newspaper. But anyway, I just think he's never going to say, oh no, I regret that, please Fred Vasseur, don't make me go there. Toto, have me back.
Well, that would be a fantastic U-turn, wouldn't it? We've seen a few of them, but wow, amazing that.
But he must, in the back of his mind, he's not an idiot. Yeah. This was a disaster for Ferrari, really. Yeah. I think Carlos Sainz came out of this unbelievably well. He goes always very well around here. Charles Leclerc, did he listen to the team too much? We've seen that in the past. Monaco 2022 springs to mind. So it's Ferrari were there and thereabouts when the rain and the drivers can make the difference, but on pure pace, they've really regressed. They're putting their upgrades from Imola back on the car, so that's got to be alarm bells for Lewis.
What was also interesting, I thought, was watching Max Verstappen's performance. He didn't really do too much wrong, did he? He was kind of under the microscope. He was pushed hard by Lando, and he actually kept his line, shall we say. Lando was able to overtake. It was all very fairly done. There was none of the aggression that we had seen in Austria. He just towed the line, didn't he, and just did enough to finish second. He seemed quite relaxed in the press conference.
100%. I think when the cameras were off, there's not a lot of off-camera giddiness, but I did notice that. I mean, the stark difference with Lando Norris. Lando Norris furious again. Not furious, just down, just despondent. That's probably the better word. Yeah. When the cameras were on, he'll crack a smile, but the rest of the time it was head down. I'm under my cap. I'm on my phone. All of that. But yeah, with Max, he, in that overtake where Lando came by, he stuck to the outside line. We learned before the race, the FIA have now told the teams that he should have been, or they should have given him a black and white warning for moving under braking in Austria. And there was nothing, there was no defence. I was actually shocked by that. I was genuinely like, wow, Max. Not even, because even at that stage, it's such a long straight, it's such you could see what was going to happen, Norris with the DRS. Max had so much time to come over and he didn't. I was really surprised. But actually, that on reflection and what he said afterwards, Red Bull just didn't have the pace in the dry. So he's Max Verstappen is a very clever guy. He's just so, especially he responds to situations. He knew he wasn't going to keep that McLaren behind, so he wasn't going to defend.
Yeah, made sense. With regards to Lando, you mentioned him before. He did look a very dejected figure again, and we've got to talk about him. And again, partly his mistake, overshooting his pit box, made the slow stop, which drew him into problems. Ironic, because that's obviously what he benefited from, slow pit stop for Red Bull in Austria. It's difficult, isn't it, to see how he picks himself up and dusts himself down and carries on from here.
Definitely, I think there's got to be questions now asked about the mistakes that are adding up. I think we were right to question what Max did in the sort of the battle in Austria. Maybe, looking back, Lando, there's a bit of chat from people in the paddock this weekend. Actually, did he lose his head a little bit, particularly at the beginning of that battle? I think he got his composure back, as we saw. But I just think, Lando, he basically said, I've been hearing that a lot lately.
Yeah.
Press conference host Tom Clarkson asked him, a race that McLaren threw away, I've been hearing that a lot lately. Now I think that the difference, I think, with, say, Verstappen last week and losing that race at the Red Bull Ring, I put that squarely on him. He blames the team, of course, but that was still a rescuable situation. With Norris and Lando, yes, Lando, I mean, 100%, as you say, the long pit stop, sliding long in the box, that's a pretty rookie error, even though things are tricky. And actually, if you look at the exact amount of time he lost to Lewis Hamilton compared to what his lead was before and what Hamilton had advantage at the end, it's entirely in that. So, but also, stopping on the wrong lap. So yeah, he's got to own that. But also, I think for McLaren, there's a certain element of this team doesn't know how to win regularly. The Miami one, I maintain that Lando Norris would have got close by the end, but there's no denying the huge element, unfortunately, in the safety car. And there's been other little things. Canada, actually, if you look at the time, if they'd got the stop timing right for Norris, the right lap, he probably would have been in a much better shape to beat Verstappen. And he's like, yeah, okay, I'll beat George. But actually, if everything had gone perfectly, as a team, when it gets it right as regularly as it does as Red Bull would have done that, I think.
Yeah, there's an argument to say, wasn't there, this time, that maybe he should have come in a lap earlier when it started to rain. They left him at a lap too long, and maybe that invited more pressure on him, etc. But it's all ifs, buts and maybes. Fantastic result for the home fans. Lots of cheering, lots of support for Lewis, and we're halfway through the season now.
I know, it doesn't feel like it. It feels like this race has been going on forever. I think Max even at the start of the press conference before everything started recording, like, so we're halfway now. Okay, normally it's almost like round 9 or whatever of the season. But yeah, I mean, it looks pretty unassailable in the championship. I think this was another example of championships are won on your bad days, and it's so many parallels with Michael Schumacher. It's the same sort of era. Defeated today, defeated last week, defeated a fair few times this season, especially compared to last year, but he's there enough times. Well,
he's still increasing his lead, isn't he? When he's not winning, he's still increasing his lead in the championship because other drivers have won. Do we think that Mercedes are now back, or were these last two results a bit of a flash in the pan? I say this because George Russell, who was doing quite well until he had a water problem on his car. Do you think Mercedes are back in it, or are we just fortunate with these two races coming as they did?
I think they are much closer to the front. There's a lot of chat. Is there something on the front end that they've changed this weekend, or sorry, in the last few weekends to go with that front wing update that they introduced in Monaco, because the drivers are just so much happier now. Like Lewis essentially saying, I feel like we're back in the fight, based on what he was saying in the press conference. But there's no denying that the McLaren was quicker when the rain came down. Probably should have been on pole position yesterday if Lando had hooked everything up. I think it's very close, but you've got to say that in what you think of a typical Formula One race, a hot environment, dry race, Mercedes were nowhere last weekend compared to Red Bull and McLaren. So they are back, but not fully back.
We've got a break now for a very short amount of time, and then obviously we're off to the Hungarian Grand Prix. That's a track also that Lewis goes well at, isn't it?
Massively, yeah. I think he's very, very keen to get there, and yeah, again, it feels like that. It's sort of sense for deja vu some of these weekends, because that's another race where you can either get very, very hot conditions, or it can be mixed and changeable. Mercedes gone there in the past. What, are they on pole the last 2 years? Russell 22, Hamilton 23 at Budapest. Am I making that up? I feel like I might be right. But anyway, even if I'm not, there's enough.
People will tell you.
Oh, they will. Right. There's enough sort of past history there that it bodes well for that team. But really, actually, I think leaving this weekend, big question marks over Red Bull. Like, why was the pace gone in the dry, especially early in the race? Like, why was Max feeling, actually, at one point I think I was going to finish 5th or 6th? Like, that's the thing. That's the element. I'm really interested to see how Christian Horner plays this one tonight.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Let's see how it all plays out in Hungary.